Welcome back, ladies and gentlemen, for another YouTube video. Allincrypto here, and today we are going to be delivering another daily cryptocurrency market update. And if you are new around here, every single day at 1 p.m. UK time, we release an update just like this one to help you stay up to date with the latest and greatest things happening within the crypto space and also the markets. And that's exactly what we're going to be doing. It was quite a heavy week for economic data, and we have seen some significant moves in the markets broadly. Yesterday, certainly, we saw a spectacular close for gold. And we will be looking at why we think this is. Right now, you've got a real kind of debt crisis or debt issue that's putting real strain on the financial system because it is the cornerstone of the system. When money comes into existence, there's an asset, which is the money. There's a liability, which is the debt. And with uncertainty there, of course, gold has got a bid. Not really sure why Bitcoin didn't. I kind of would have expected it to do so. And certainly, actually, yesterday, we would have expected Bitcoin to do quite well with the news that the SEC won't challenge the court ruling on Grayscale's Bitcoin ETF. We are going to be diving into this to kick the video off, and then we will be looking at some price action across a number of different markets, not just Bitcoin, looking at some Jamie Dimon comments, and then we're going to be playing Reagan's Economist, essentially talking and highlighting Bitcoin and its potential. The world is waking up to distributed ledgers, period. And actually the concept of an alternative money, store of value, something such as Bitcoin and its kind of role in the world that we're moving towards. It seems to me like more and more people are agreeing that actually there's a place for Bitcoin. Well-respected economists, largest hedge fund managers in the world, and we are yet to see that really take place. So it's an exciting time ahead. I know the markets can be boring and sort of lackluster at times, but remember what it is you're trying to do here, guys. Whether you're an investor, whether you're a speculator, whether you're just somebody that's interested in this, you're interested in a space that's in a very early stage and is going to become infinitely larger. Potentially not infinitely, but much larger. So let's start the video off actually with the main news that came really out of yesterday. And that was the fact that the SEC won't challenge a court ruling on Bitcoin's ETF. Of course, guys, we will leave a link to this article. You can find it over at allincrypto.com, which is our news outlet. Amazing response, guys. You know, we've had so many viewers of the website and we've only just launched it. It's very, very rewarding to see, and a massive thank you to each and every one of you supporting this. So the US Securities Exchange Commission has reportedly decided not to appeal the recent court decision in favor of Grayscale's investments. This decision mandates the SEC to review Grayscale's application for a spot Bitcoin ETF traded fund. So this is not a guarantee of a spot Bitcoin ETF, but it is a major step closer to one. We know recently that there's been a lot of refilings. An example of one, of course, is Cathie Wood's ARK Invest ETF. ARK Innovation Trust actually doesn't look too bad. They're fun. But anyway, that's for another story. But the ARK resubmission, the SEC had sort of asked them basically to put the fact that Bitcoin mining does have sort of negative repercussions in regards to how you mine it. And I found that very interesting, but all steps forward to what we think is an eventuality. I am actually long GBTC right now. It's still at an 18% discount, but that's just me being transparent and honest about my current positions. So the background of this, of course, for anybody who's unfamiliar, is the court's ruling came after Grayscale sought to transform its Grayscale Bitcoin Trust, GBTC, into a spot Bitcoin ETF. The SEC decided not to challenge the verdict, was highlighted in a report by Reuters on the 13th of October. So yesterday, citing some familiar sources familiar with the situation. An analyst take, a Bloomberg analyst anticipate that the SEC will not appeal to the Supreme Court. However, they emphasize that this doesn't necessarily guarantee approval of Grayscale's application. James Seifert, may not be pronouncing that right. A Bloomberg ETF analyst commented on the development, stating, "I do not think they will appeal to the Supreme Court either. Dialogue between Grayscale and the SEC should begin next week. Hoping for more info on next steps sometimes next week or the week after." So this is all very positive, guys. It didn't really move Bitcoin's price. I mean, you had this. On the back end of it, maybe you've got a bit of a double bottom scenario forming on the sort of lower time frame. For me, we're still uncertain on Bitcoin until it really breaks support or resistance. So right now, unfortunately, and we've been here for a while, you are just stuck between these two key levels. You know, the 28,500 and of course 25,000, which is also a neckline of our inverse head and shoulders, which would partially invalidate it. A real invalidation would be here. And we have looked at both the upside scenario, which is essentially you take in the resistance. For me, really, it would be 30K, 31K, and you're going to go straight up to 40 and start making some of the targets that we have for it. Or do we need that deeper correction, that A, B into a C, and this head and shoulders playing out that's going to take you down here? It's all still to play for, I think, whilst we're currently consolidating. So short term, unfortunately, guys, we don't have too much of an insight on the price immediately, but we are still mid to long term bullish. And it's very interesting to me that people are very pessimistic on the crypto space, and it's never been closer to global recognition and adoption and usage. Not just Bitcoin, everything. Crypto is absolutely transforming the world in more ways than one. Not only is it challenging the sort of traditional financial systems and giving people a lifeboat, which may not seem that relevant in the West, but in a lot of countries out there, it's really acted as exactly that, a lifeboat. But also distributed ledger more broadly is completely changing the world in terms of making things more efficient, and it's going to be the operating system to come. So a Bitcoin spot ETF is coming. This could definitely play into the price, just like it did over here and here, but we will see. Yesterday you had some... So to recap a little bit on what we've been looking at before we dive into the Economist actually talking about Bitcoin, we were looking at this week potentially being a risk-on week. I do not believe that that's going to be a neckline for the dollar now. And what we were looking at is going on the weekly chart, how last Friday we got a close for the dollar. This has somewhat been retraced. However, if we start to add risk on, Bitcoin we know really hasn't done a lot, but the likes of gold and the SPY, so we just put gold on twice there, they have had decent weeks. Gold probably more so, Bitcoin not so much. I do think the dollar is at a turning point. And yesterday you really saw an aggressive move for gold. And I thought Bitcoin would have appreciated from that as well. And I think this has a lot to do with the debt system. So gold looks great. You guys will know that we actually have projected targets for gold to around about $3,000. That also lines up with our kind of targets for the S&P. We've got ultimately higher targets for the S&P. We've got higher targets for many, many stocks out there. We're kind of long Tesla at the moment, along with GBTC. We're just waiting for things to kind of turn around and for that risk on period to come, which is going to be correlated with the dollar going down. Dollar's obviously been spiking because of inflation. There's still a lot of uncertainty out there. Lots of people getting a bit worried about the yield curve. We know when it uninverts, you're likely going to get your demand destructive event, which we don't think is for a while off, given the sort of nature of rates lagging. But gold had a really good day yesterday. This is obviously on the back end, in my opinion, of the bond market not doing very well. Bonds are basically the fiat systems. Without, if your bonds were worth nothing, the fiat system itself would be worth nothing. JP Morgan Chase CEO Jamie Dimon warns this is the most dangerous time for the world in decades. He obviously cites conflicts that are going on, but more probably so, beyond the military conflicts in the Ukraine and Israel, Dimon cited the burdening national debt, the largest peacetime fiscal deficit ever. And this is only going to get worse and worse and worse. And you've got this kind of death spiral, if you will, in regards to the bond market, the debt markets. And ultimately, it's begging the question of when on. If you look at where markets initially rallied from November, it coincided with capitulation in the bond markets and the Fed actually stepping in the form of bailing out Silicon Valley Bank. And they also did the same thing in the UK with the gilts. So we're waiting for that to sort of turn as well. That's going to be, I think, a real positive sign for the markets. We'll see how the week ahead opens up and what news we've got coming out next week. It's all still about Bitcoin taking either one of this. I can still see the downside scenario playing out just as much as I can the upside. In the short term, mid to long term, you guys know that we think the spring is here and you're well and truly on your way to higher ground. Let's just put it there. If you look at coin shares, they've seen inflows recently, a turn in inflows. If you look at GBTC, they've also seen a lot of interest in their sort of products. All good signs, in my opinion, of a kind of appetite for the market coming back. We just need that risk on period to come. And then I think crypto performs as it should do. Let's dive into this take from one of Reagan's economists. Very interesting take. And I think really this is symbolic of the way that crypto is kind of grasping the world. Bitcoin is becoming a genuine asset that's seen by asset managers, fund managers, as worthy of being in a portfolio. And we're going to see more and more of this. This is yet to even really happen at large scale because of regulatory uncertainty. But this is all coming. Obviously, an ETF ties into that and everything else. But let's dive into this clip, and then we're going to round the video off.
Because deflation depends, I don't know if you think of it in terms of Milton Friedman or stuff, and I don't. But let's just say you did. Because there's a limited number of Bitcoins, that therefore as GDP grows in the world over time and all that, that then you would find less and less Bitcoin per unit of GDP. And then you'd start finding deflation occur to get the real value of Bitcoin up to being the same ratio as GDP. That's sort of the monetary view of the world. If you look at that, there's no reason why that's true, because you can surely have a system that uses Bitcoin as sort of a monetary base, the way gold was. And then you had the banks, which then used the leverage on the gold system. So banks would issue liabilities that were larger than their reserves based upon their cash inflows and outflows on that. So you can have clearly a monetary base and a monetary expansion, and allow Bitcoin assets total to expand quite along with GDP or whatever else the demand for money is. Now, you probably have substitutes in the system as well. I don't know if you do, will or not, but we have all sorts of substitutes in money in the system. I wrote a piece in the JPE called Trade Credit in the Money Market. You can use trade credit to arbitrage the transactions demand for money by using trade credit there and matching income and expenditure streams on credit. So there are just lots of ways. So I don't see a serious complaint about Bitcoin with regard to deflation. And if you get a price rule system in there, if something like a banking system comes in and decides to do that, I don't see why you'd have a problem on volatility either. I mean, all of these are there. With regard to anonymity, I think anonymity is a wonderful trait, not a bad trait. Yes, it can be used by criminals, that's for damn sure, but it cannot be used by governments. And I sent you that book, Kathy, on coding. If you know prime number coding, you can make literally codes today that are unbreakable, and you can transfer them to an owner and a thing, and you can guarantee. And Kathy, you have that book there. I don't know if you did. I didn't bring my copy today. I should have.
Fascinating. And again, we're seeing more and more well-respected economists that have initially been against Bitcoin and crypto generally, really warming up to it. And this is all at a time when regulations are, getting closer and closer. And I really do think we are going to see that crypto boom. Ultimately, guys, I believe you're going to have your bull market before the demand destructive event. The demand destructive event could take place later on in the bull market, but I think you're going to see some really good price appreciation before we end up in that recession, in that kind of demand destructive event. And actually, rates lag. We know this. The S&P will rally within 2% of its high of 2 months of the actual recession being official. We still think with a lot of economic data that that doesn't seem apparent yet. And ultimately, we think crypto is going to enjoy the weather that's brought out, more broadly for the markets. So that's our take. Very interesting. Great news about Grayscale. We'll see how next week opens up. Bitcoin's still in a range, but we're getting some positive signs in other markets that have good correlations with Bitcoin. And of course, we know, more and more economists warming up to the fact. Saturdays, guys, have a fantastic Saturday, and I'll catch you all in the next one.